What's up, everybody? Justin here. In this show, it's going to be a tribute show to the late, great, loose cannon Brian Pillman. I was a big fan of Brian Pillman, big fan of his work, big fan of his promos. The guy was a great worker, great wrestler. So this will be a short tribute to Brian Pillman. I've never done a Brian Pillman tribute because he passed away way before I was on YouTube making videos. Brian Pillman passed away on October 5th, 20 years ago. 20 years ago. Time really flies. As you get older, especially once you get to be over 30 years old, time really starts flying. So, with your friends, with your relatives, cherish boyfriends, girlfriends, husbands, wives. Cherish your time with them. Because time flies. So cherish your time with them. So 20 years ago, today, it's October 5th, 2017. October 5th, 1997, 20 years ago, Brian Pillman passed away sadly. He was a great worker. He passed away at age 35. He was born on May 22nd, 1962 in Cincinnati, Ohio. He had 6 children, including 2 stepchildren. So, one of Brian Pillman, one of his sons, I believe, started training to wrestle. I believe he went to Lance Storm to get trained. I hope the guy makes it. And it makes it to WWE or NXT or Ring of Honor. I hope. I don't know his name. It might be Brian Pillman Jr. I don't know. Maybe he'll change his name so he doesn't have to try to live up to expectations of what his father did, because his father, Brian Pillman, was great. But whatever wrestling name his son takes, I hope he makes it big, and I hope he's a good worker, like his father. So Brian Pillman started and made his wrestling debut made his debut in 1986. I believe he's trained in the dungeon, in the Hart family dungeon, I believe. But before that, let's talk about Brian Pillman and his football career, because he had a pretty damn good football career. He was undersized. He was only 5, I don't know his height, or he was 6 foot. But he didn't weigh that much, so to make it in football was pretty damn impressive. That shows you what a great athlete Brian Pillman was, that he made it in college football, went to NFL tryout, and he made it. He made the team. He was a part of the Cincinnati Bengals and I believe the Buffalo Bills on special teams. So he went to Miami of Ohio as a college. He was a nose tackle. And he played in 1984, he played for the Cincinnati Bengals. In 1985, he played for the Buffalo Bills. And in 1986, he played for the Canadian Stampeders, Canadian football team. So, after Brian Pillman made the roster, I'll just read a little bit about his football career. It says Brian Pillman, before he made the roster of the Bengals. In the Cincinnati Enquirer, Brian Pillman and John Harbaugh, current head coach of Baltimore Ravens, were roommates. They were roommates while they were at Miami of Ohio. So that is pretty cool. Now I'm going to talk about his professional wrestling career. I'm not going to go over every single feud he had, but I will talk about some of my favorite Brian Pillman feuds. One was against Jushin Thunder Liger. And some of his favorite matches, Super Brawl 2 against Jushin Thunder Liger. He had a very good match. One of my favorite Flying Brian. One of my favorite Flying Brian matches. Against Jushin Liger, Super Brawl 2 against Lex Luger at Halloween Havoc 89 for the U.S. title. That was pretty darn good. And I thank Brian Pillman. I credit him for pulling a good match out of Lex Luger because the guy could not work. He was just a muscle-bound idiot that was clumsy. Luger was a great athlete. The guy was in the USFL. He was a football player, whatever. But my point is Brian Pillman was a better athlete. 1,000 times better than Lex Luger. And Pillman, to me, Brian Pillman doesn't get enough credit by wrestling fans for what he did, for his size. For what he did, he was damn good for what he did. Brian Pillman, to me, he's underrated. And he's not looked at by a lot of wrestling fans as one of the greats, but he was damn great. And he was a really great heel, especially when he's a loose cannon. Part of the Horsemen in WCW around 95 into early 96. He was part of the Horsemen. And then when he went to WWF as a loose cannon, you didn't know, even when he went to ECW for a short time, you did not know if he was for real, if he was like really lost his mind and was a loose cannon, or if he's just playing his character up. And he was good friends with, or Jim Ross was good friends with Brian Pillman, and Jim Ross did not even know if Pillman was playing a character. He was telling Pillman, he's saying, is this for real? Are you doing this all for real? I mean, he says to Brian Pillman, you can tell me if you're working everybody or not. So I believe Pillman did tell JR he was just playing his character. So Stampede Wrestling. Brian Pillman was in Stampede Wrestling from 1986 to 1988. He had good matches in Stampede Wrestling. He formed a tag team with Bruce Hart, and they were known as Bad Company. Or with Bruce Hart's son, or one of the Harts. So in Stampede Wrestling in 1987, in April, they won the Bad Company, Stampede Wrestling. They won the International Tag Team Championships. And after that, well, Brian Pillman went to WCW, got his big break in WCW, NWA, WCW, whatever you want to call him. Brian Pillman was there. It's Flying Brian from 1989 until 1993. As I said, he had good matches with Lex Luger, Jushin Thunder Liger. He was in a tag team with Tom Zink. They were a pretty damn good team. And they had really good tag matches with Midnight Express, the Andersons, and the Freebirds, and teams like that. So then from 1993 until early 94, the Hollywood Blondes were born. Brian Pillman and stunning Steve Austin. Great team. Underrated team is the Hollywood Blondes. One of my favorite tag teams that were in WCW. So then in 94, Brian Pillman toured He toured with ECW for a little bit. And his most famous match was against Shane Douglas. And Sherry Martel was his manager. But Brian Pillman lost, or Flying Brian lost in ECW to Ron Simmons and Too Cold Scorpio. So then in 95 he joined the Four Horsemen. That was great stuff. That's when Pillman really started creating his loose cannon gimmick and character. Also, before, he had a great match with Jushin Thunder Liger at Super Brawl 2. Brian Pillman, Flying Brian, went away for a little bit and became Yellow Dog. Put a yellow mask on him. It was god-awful. He came down to the ring with a golden retriever, a yellow dog, and his name was Yellow Dog. It was a god-awful character. I believe Dusty Rhodes came up with it. Not a good character, Dusty. So, whatever. Yellow Dog was Brian Pillman. The only pay-per-view he appeared on was Halloween Havoc. Great American Bash 91. He appeared on that pay-per-view as Yellow Dog. So, then a famous match. This was funny. A match between Eddie Guerrero and Brian Pillman. I believe he's still known as Flying Brian, or maybe he's just Brian Pillman. On January 23rd, 96, at a Clash of Champions. This was classic. This was legendary, what Brian Pillman did. Pillman went outside the ring, grabbed Bobby Heenan by the collar, causing Heenan, who had a history of neck problems, so Bobby Heenan got pissed, and Bobby Heenan blurted out, "What the fuck are you doing? What the fuck are you doing?" live on the air. So that was pretty funny. So then after that, at the Super Brawl, February 96 pay-per-view, pretty famous match, but I'm sure it was all a work. But it didn't seem like a work. Brian Pillman revealed that Kevin Sullivan, during their match, he revealed that Kevin Sullivan was a booker. He called him Booker Man. It was pretty funny. So during their match, it was called an I respect you match. I respect you strap match. And during it, Brian Pillman gets on the mic and says, "I respect you, I quit." And Pillman grabbed the mic, sarcastically saying, "I respect you, Booker Man." That was pretty damn funny. So then Pillman was fired. He was fired in February 96. It was probably over drug issues. He was fired by Eric Bischoff in February 96. In Bischoff's autobiography, he said that Pillman was fired so that he could go and develop the loose cannon gimmick in ECW and then return to WCW with more legit heat. So Bischoff fired him for a reason, I guess. I didn't know. That's why he fired him. But that's why he fired him. So anyways, after ECW, Pillman did not want to come back and went to sign with WWF. So his WWF run, it wasn't that memorable, but his promo work on the mic and on some commentary, Pillman was great. He was a great talker. He didn't have to wrestle anymore. He was in a really bad car accident where he destroyed his ankle. So he had to rehab and probably was out of the ring for about over a year. But he did cut some pretty insane, controversial promos. One of them was at King of the Ring 96, where he brought up Jeffrey Dahmer, and that was in my hometown. I was actually at King of the Ring 96, where Pillman said all that stuff in his promo. He got a lot of insane heat for saying that in Milwaukee, because people in Milwaukee, trust me, they do not want to be reminded of what Jeffrey Dahmer did here. The guy was a sick, mentally ill guy. So, my opinion, Pillman was the best at promos in the WWF, and his most memorable storyline, it wasn't a match, it was a storyline. The entire episode of Raw, Steve Austin, Stone Cold Steve Austin, was trying to break in Brian Pillman's house because he just wanted to kick his ass. It was great TV. I was on the edge of my seat watching it. And I remember as a kid, I was 13 years old. When did that happen? November 4th. November 4th, 96. A year later, in November 97, sadly, Brian Pillman would not be alive any longer. But on November 4th episode of Raw from 96, it was Pillman's Got a Gun episode. And I remember watching it, I was 13, and I thought it was a real gun. I'm sure it was a real gun, but it wasn't loaded. So Pillman pulls out the gun, says, "I'm going to shoot you." He's pointing the gun at the camera, pointing the gun at Steve Austin, saying, "I'm going to kill you, you son of a bitch," pointing the gun at Steve Austin. And Steve Austin, the camera's cut off. And we don't know if Stone Cold was shot or not. But then they come back, they get the cameras back up and running. And Kevin Kelly, the announcer, is inside Pillman's house. He says, Vince, Stone Cold saw the gun, and he left. He left right away. So that's what happened. But not before Stone Cold broke his window, unlocked his door, got in his house. I think it was a trailer home. Looked like a trailer home. I don't know. Then what was even more funny, and even made this episode of Raw even more epic, and just very memorable episode of Raw, was Brian Pillman had two guys, they were probably jobbers, two guys outside his house trying to attack Stone Cold from coming in his house. So I guess Brian Pillman, they said they were his friends, and Stone Cold beat the hell out of them outside. He beat the crap out of them. He was sticking one of the guy's head in a car, pushing the door in his head. He threw one of them in a baby pool. It was classic. It was really funny. So anyways, that's probably the most memorable thing Brian Pillman did in the WWF, in his WWF run. He pointed the gun at Steve Austin and said, "I will shoot you, get out of my house," something like that. So after that, sadly, Pillman tried to return to the ring in the summer of 97. He worked a match against Stone Cold on a Raw. He had a feud, pretty good feud with Goldust, where Pillman lost, so he had to wear Marlena's dress. Well, then Brian Pillman started making these videos. Let me go back to his wrestling career on this phone I'm looking at. So, I'm going to go back to his wrestling career. So the other memorable thing, not just a gun episode of Raw, but Brian Pillman joined the Hart Foundation. That was pretty cool. It was a great fit for him. He was perfect with the Hart Foundation, because that's where he was trained. In the dungeon, he started in Stampede Wrestling with the Hart family. So anyways, he joined the Hart Foundation in 97, and the segments that Brian Pillman had these short videos with Marlena, because he defeated Goldust, I believe, at Ground Zero 97 in your house pay-per-view, I think. So Brian Pillman got Marlena for 30 days. Marlena was his property. So for several weeks, Marlena and Brian Pillman appeared in a segment called Brian Pillman's XXX Files, where Marlena was made up and she's wearing sexually provocative, revealing clothing, and she appeared in the videos. Basically, she appeared as Brian Pillman's sex slave. Basically, he looked like a pimp, like he's pimping Marlena out. So anyways, on October 5th, again, 20 years ago, it's been 20 years since Brian Pillman has passed away. Very sad, very tragic. I still feel sad for his wife that he left, all his kids that he left. The WWE did a great tribute to him when they made a DVD of Brian Pillman and his life. It's a very good DVD. If you don't know much about Brian Pillman, if you weren't born when he was around, watch his documentary on the WWE Network, the Brian Pillman DVD. So he died on October 5th, 97. 20 years ago. I can't believe it's been 20 years, but it has. Brian Pillman was scheduled to wrestle Dude Love at Bad Blood in Your House. And as the show was closer to bell time, by 7 p.m., Brian Pillman had not arrived. He did not arrive at the arena. Jim Cornette was instructed to find out where his whereabouts were. Cornette contacted the Budget Motel in Minnesota, where Pillman had stayed the previous night, and Jim Cornette was told by the receptionist that the maids have found Brian Pillman dead earlier in the day at 1:09 p.m. He was 35 years old. His autopsy, it was not drugs. His autopsy, cause of death, was a heart attack caused by a previous undetected heart condition. He had heart disease. It wasn't a drug overdose. He had heart disease, and doctors couldn't find it. Back then, 20 years ago, it wasn't that easy to find heart disease and heart problems. It wasn't as easy as it is now. I mean, if Brian Pillman would have got his heart disease, if they would have caught it, he could still be alive today, if they would have found it. But they couldn't find it. And same thing with Macho Man Randy Savage. If they would have found his problems before it happened, he would still be alive. So, the bottom line is, this Brian Pillman tribute 20 years ago today, October 5th, 97, Brian Pillman passed away. I have great memories of Brian Pillman. The guy's great. I'm still a fan of the guy, and every time I watch him on the WWE Network, I get a smile because the guy brought me a lot of joy as a wrestling fan. So, I hope you all enjoyed this Brian Pillman 20 years ago tribute. Brian Pillman passed away 20 years ago today. So, I hope you enjoyed it. Brian Pillman, someday, I hope I get to meet you someday and just say thank you for all the entertainment. So follow me on Twitter. Like, comment, share, and subscribe. Bye for now, everybody.